Welcome to Second Take, the show that takes a look at the issues behind the news. Government will be releasing a remodelled integrated resource plan for electricity next week. Terence Creamer joins me to discuss the development and what to expect. Hi Terence.
Hi Chanel.
What is the background to the release of this new IRP?
Well, the background really goes back to an outdated integrated resource plan of 2019 that we currently have in the system. But we must realise that that took many years itself to update. You know, the initial IRP, our first one was 2010. We only got a new one in 2019, and that was already outdated by the time it was published because the assumptions are changing all the time. So ideally, we should be updating this every year. But we've had this process of eventually having an integrated resource plan 2023 published as a draft document and gazetted in January this year, so that there could be public consultation on that. It was a very sort of half-hearted public consultation, a couple of virtual workshops, lots of public comment flowed. There was a lot of reaction to it, mostly adverse, around the assumptions, around the constraints that had been placed on renewables, around the big amount of gas to power that had been put into the IRP, around the demand assumptions, around the technology costs. Everyone had concerns with that, and there were thousands of submissions and quite a few substantial submissions. So when the new electricity and energy minister came into place after the elections, he looked at this and said we need to have a process of reassessing all these submissions. He admitted there were problems with the draft and said there would be some exercise involving SANEDI that would take place. And now SANEDI's done this exercise, they've done some remodelling, and we're now at the point where they're going to actually publish an updated draft of the document, and that's going to be released next week.
What can we expect from the document?
Well, I think it's probably going to be, there's going to be definitely changes. They've remodelled, there's been a reworked document, that the assumptions have changed, and I think a couple of big ones that we know. The last draft was presented when we still had very intense load shedding and a coal fleet that was operating at below a 50% energy availability factor. And that reality was embedded into the IRP. And that led to something of an outcry because the IRP is supposed to give you system adequacy. You know, it's supposed to show how we're going to get to that point. And actually what the document showed is that we weren't going to have system adequacy until something like 2028. We were just going to have load shedding all the way through because we couldn't cover the fact that EAF was so low. We know now with the big maintenance effort that's been undertaken by Eskom, and very successfully so, that we now have a higher level of energy availability factor from the coal fleet, above 60%. And there's a big push to go to 70 and 75. We're having NERSA hearings at the moment. That's one of the questions that's being raised. Why are you not at 75? Isn't that what an efficient operator should be at? We aren't quite at that point yet, but we're at a much higher energy availability factor. So that will be reflected, I think, in the remodelled draft. The other thing that will be reflected is the delay to the decommissioning of coal units that were supposed to be taken out between now and 2030. We know that government's given permission for Eskom to operate those, even though they're going to be, they don't meet minimum emission standards till 2030. We also know from what's been told is that there's only going to be one horizon. So the draft that was put out in January had a horizon up to 2030 and then a 2031 to 2050 horizon. So that sort of two horizon was also criticised. Some people embraced it, some criticised for having those two horizons. This is going to just have one horizon to 2050. But I think there's going to be a lot of more of the same. I think we're going to still see a lot of gas in this IRP. I think we're still going to see nuclear, which was criticised in the second horizon. In this new updated IRP, we are going to see the coal in for longer, but then maybe quite a steep decline post-2030 as we decommission units. So there's going to be a decommissioning profile, a higher EAF, as I mentioned. Demand assumption, we'll have to see what demand assumptions they put in there, but we know that the demand has been tracking downwards, and Eskom's application to NERSA shows continual tracking down. We know that a lot of rooftop solar has been put in. A lot of big utility scale solar is being wheeled to large industry, so that presupposes that demand will fall from the traditional Eskom sources. So there's those sort of things. There's obviously technologies like battery storage. Wind was a big loser in the last document. I think there's an indication that will also change in the new document. But we'll have to wait and see. But definitely it is a whole revamp of what we saw in January.
A very short period of time has been set aside for public consultations.
Yes, and I think given the far-reaching nature of the changes that are likely in this next document, giving a week on a whole new remodelled document, I'm not sure that's going to be accepted. I think this gives an important signal. It sets the sort of tone for procurement of new electricity. It has major implications when you get it wrong, because it's very costly for the consumer downstream. Obviously, one of the issues I think that the IRP will also address is the whole grid, the investment that we need to make in the grid. And is that sufficient? And is it aligned to the Eskom's transmission development plan? We'll have to see. So there's a lot of issues and components to this that need to be interrogated. Having a week to consult, one physical meeting and a couple of virtual meetings, I'm not sure is that sufficient, and I don't know if that's going to be acceptable. The Minister says he wants this, after this week, he wants it finalised by the end of November and then taken through the NEDLAC and Cabinet processes so that by the end of the first quarter of next year we have a new IRP. Now many would cheer that. We need to have an updated IRP. The 2019 one is out of date, but really it doesn't look feasible to expect people to comment on a document that you're going to have sight on probably only on Tuesday, and there's no more discussion by Friday. I'm not sure that that's acceptable. If it was just tweaks to the draft, which everyone is going to reject anyway because it was so bad, then maybe that's acceptable. But this is a remodelled document. I think to expect the public to accept that they've only got 1 week to comment in a very limited fashion, I think there's going to be a backlash towards that.
Thank you. That's the Second Take show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis. Also, don't forget to listen to the audio version of our Engineering News daily email newsletter.